The ever-expanding multiverse is set to usher in some of the most iconic characters from Marvel's comic roster that have yet to be seen in the MCU, with Patrick Stewart's iteration of Charles Xavier being set to return to the big screen for the first time ever since his departure in Logan, and Kang the Conqueror set to make his live-action debut. There is no shortage of what the multiverse has to offer. Among the most avidly awaited inclusions, the introduction of mutants and Marvel's first family have been at the top of most fans' lists. But while many have turned their attention to the multiversal consequences, there is one intriguing question that arises from the mainline MCU that we know and love. One that might be directly related to one of the most avidly awaited debuts in modern cinema. In Loki, it is explained that He Who Remains is a refugee of the first multiversal war, and is the individual who rewrote the multiverse into a single time stream, all but eliminating the multiverse as a concept overall.
I weaponized Alliance, that I ended the multiversal war and prevent any further branches, hence the TVA.
He explains that he scripted a timeline that would be safe from the individual who would later become Kang the Conqueror, implying that in this new mainline timeline, Kang the Conqueror was never born, and therefore never sets his sight on the multiversal conquest. But few have stopped to wonder why exactly this is. What events in the MCU's history prevented the birth of Kang the Conqueror, and could this be the reason we have yet to see one of the most influential figures in the Marvel Universe in the MCU? Well, stick with us today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, and let's discuss the theory that He Who Remains deliberately constructed a timeline wherein Reed Richards does not exist, with the express purpose of preventing Kang the Conqueror's birth, and explore whether or not this might be the reason why we haven't seen Reed Richards or the Fantastic Four in the MCU as of yet. In the comics, Kang the Conqueror is a distant descendant of the Richards family, and he uses his incredible intellect to reconstruct the fragments of a broken time machine, thus beginning his villainous tenure as an interdimensional tyrant who travels throughout the time stream in order to collect artifacts and gadgets, as well as lay waste to eras that he seeks to dominate. Reed Richards is often regarded as one of the most influential beings in the Marvel Comics universe, and is widely accepted as the single smartest individual on planet Earth. Reed has explored the neighboring timelines, different dimensions, and the vastest reaches of space, pioneering an era of exploration unrivaled by anyone else, and the Fantastic Four are cornerstones of any reality they find themselves in. In the MCU, however, we have heard nothing of the iconic first family of Marvel, and while the out-of-universe explanation can be attributed to the rights issues between Disney and Fox, is it possible that there is an in-universe explanation why the Fantastic Four have yet to appear? If He Who Remains specifically designed the sacred timeline to omit the presence of the Fantastic Four, then it could explain why we have yet to hear of them, despite heroes such as the Eternals, Captain America, and Captain Marvel being present for years before the debut of Iron Man in 2008. Though deleted dialogue from Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man seems to hint that there were originally meant to be more heroes present during that era.
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough.
It's important to mention though that this dialogue is no longer canon, seeing as he mentions radioactive bug bites, a direct reference to Spider-Man, who we know was not yet Spider-Man, as at the time he would have been no older than 7 or 8 years old when that scene eventually would take place, again with it ultimately being deleted. But regardless of whether or not the scene is canon or not, it goes to show that the original idea was to open the wider universe to mutants and Spider-Man, both of whom Marvel did not yet have the rights for. Scripting a timeline wherein the Fantastic Four does not have nearly the same level of influence on the universe could allow for a reality wherein Kang the Conqueror is never born, and the lineage that would someday lead to the intertemporal conquest could never come to fruition, and eliminating them altogether would be a surefire way to ensure that this never happens, which would handily explain why we haven't heard from the Fantastic Four as of yet, nor Kang the Conqueror. This brings up the question, however, if Reed Richards was never meant to exist on the sacred timeline, then how can he be expected to make his debut now that Marvel does own the rights to the character and the entirety of the Fantastic Four? For this, we have two explanations. The first option is one that is widely seen as the less likely of the two, and it proposes that the timeline is now in flux and is set to bend in ways that He Who Remains never anticipated.
We just crossed the threshold.
anticipated. Seeing as nothing is scripted anymore, Reed Richards might now be free to make his debut without the initial constraints that He Who Remains put on the timeline, seeing as he is now dead and the TVA is no longer monitoring the time stream to such an extent. We do know that one iteration of the TVA is now under the control of a version of Kang, though it seems that since the multiverse is now open, very few iterations are focused on minor Nexus events splintering from their home realities. This option seems to be the less likely of the two, however, for the simple reason that Reed Richards needs to have an appropriate age for his introduction, and introducing him as a fully grown man just a few years after opening the multiverse would imply that he already existed on the sacred timeline, nullifying He Who Remains' initial goal. The next exploration is perhaps the more simple of the two reasons, but sometimes the easiest answer is the most valid. It proposes that a multiversal variant will make his debut in the near future, and that he and his family will eventually make the jump towards being in the MCU and MCU mainstays. If this is the case, then seeing Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four in the multiverse could introduce us to a new, different iteration of the cast before finally making their leap into the mainline MCU, and seeing them re-honed to become the permanent mainstays of the Marvel Universe could happen in any number of believable ways. For one, this jump could theoretically come as a result of their universe being either destroyed in some way or being subjugated to the conquests of Kang, but these are just two options for the limitless array of potential ways that this could eventually play out. If the Fantastic Four are forced to be relocated, then the MCU would seem to be the perfect destination, seeing as they are without any iteration of the Fantastic Four, and this version of the Fantastic Four is without a home universe. Their relocation as multiversal refugees could cement a long-term cast in the MCU while still giving the first family an extensive history together to draw from, as they find themselves a new home in the mainline universe that we know, introducing a seasoned team of explorers and heroes, as well as explaining why the MCU has never seen or heard from one of the most prolific and influential teams in Marvel's history. But anyway, my friends, do you think this might be the reason Reed Richards hasn't been introduced into the Marvel Universe yet? Do you believe that He Who Remains specifically wrote the Fantastic Four out of the sacred timeline? And if so, how do you think Reed Richards will make his debut in the next few years? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for continuing to watch and support the channel. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I hope you have a great day.